Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of TFB TV. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be interviewing a Second World War B-17 radio operator by the name of James Lee Hutchinson, who wrote a number of books about his experience in the Second World War. Feel free to purchase some of his books, but we hooked up with him in Indiana and he talked to us about some of the small arms and some of the armaments and some of the stuff that B-17 crewmen had to go through in the Second World War on a B-17 heavy bomber. We'd like to give a shout out to Ventura Munitions for providing us the ammunition we use in various firearms reviews. They really help keep the channel going and allow us to bring the kinds of content that you see here today. And we really hope you enjoy this interview and learn a little bit about some of the small arms on board a B-17 in the Second World War.
We all had 50 calibers. We had a waist gunner with a gun apiece. We had a tail gunner with 2 guns. We had the ball turret with 2 guns. We had the top turret with 2 guns. And we had, by the time, we had a single 50 caliber gun sticking out, one for the navigator, one for the bombardier. But then, by the time they kept modifying the B-17, so we got down to the B-17G model, which is what I had all the time. And they had added a chin turret with two more machine guns, and the bombardier could operate that remote control. And that put a stop to, you see hear so much about 12 o'clock high when they came in straight at you out of the sun.
Yeah.
Those 210s put a little stop to that.
Yeah.
Because now you had 4 guns pointing at that guy instead of 2.
Yeah.
Before we only had the guy on top. The guy ball turret gunner could never get, if they were at high, he'd never get a shot at him. So then they began coming in at the side and tail, and they knew exactly where our range, the waist gunner and the tail gunner couldn't cover this certain number of degrees, so they'd know they'd come in there, or they'd come in underneath, or the ball turret gunner was the only guy that could get them.
Yeah.
And they had it all planned out. It was a strategic war, but the only jets involved were the ones the Germans had, and that thing could go over 500 miles an hour.
Could you talk about the ball turret gunner? They usually picked like really short guys to go in that position.
Yeah, he got trained. That was decided in combat crew training. When you went to combat crew training after gunnery school, you didn't know anybody. You went to. I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they said, "Well, you're going to be on B-17," which tickled me to death because they didn't even know what plane I'd be on. And so then they said it's to Sioux City, and they just matched us up. All of a sudden we had 6 gunners, an engineer, a radio operator, an armor gunner, and then 3 more gunners, and you had the officers.
What's an armor gunner?
The armor gunner just supposed to know most about the guns.
Yeah.
He was your gunman.
And that
he had a little extra training.
Would that be 1 per crew? Or?
Well, yeah, usually there was one on a crew that had a little bit more training. He didn't get them out of the rank. They were generally staff sergeants, and the engineer and radio operator were tech sergeants. That was the way it was.
Yeah.
But one guy had armor training.
What were some of the problems that were encountered with the 50s during the mission? Some of the things guys had to watch out for? Well,
you had to have the right spacing, the head spacing they called it, a dime, so much carry to allow a little space. And everybody carried we had a little tool you could carry and space it that way.
Head space and timing.
Yeah, head spacing. When we took gunnery school, we had to be able to take those things apart and put them back together blindfolded. And I think there were 52 different pieces, and you had to put that thing. The final test was taking it apart and putting it together blindfolded. Yeah. And I had all these moving parts that could freeze up, and you get the right long run amount of oil in it, freeze up, or it would a shell could jam, a cartridge could jam. 50 caliber shell is about 4 inches long, so you could have trouble with that. Or the belt that fed the shells into the gun could jam up. But freezing was the big part, and there were several different incidents where planes were shot down because the guns froze.
And what would you do to prevent that?
You just made sure that you had good. I guess the gunner, his job was to check that gun.
Yeah.
And of course, our guns were taken out each night, cleaned and oiled, etc. We did it sometimes ourselves. We'd go in for debriefing, and then we'd go back out and take the guns out. But in most cases, the guys on the ground loaded the gun, put the guns in, and took them out and cleaned them. Mm-hmm. So it was the only prevention you had was just checking it and hoping that everything worked.
Yeah.
And of course, all guns wouldn't freeze at once unless something had just really goofed up.
Yeah, yeah.
The ground crews were just fantastic people. They had somebody specialist at every job, mm-hmm. and they'd work around the clock. They'd even shovel snow off the runways and everything else. They did everything they could to keep us in the air.
So how effective were these? So with the B-17, the gunners, the positions you all named, with the tail gunner, the two-waist gunners, the ball turret, the top turret, the bombardier navigator. So we're talking about 7 gun positions on the plane.
Yeah, you could.
How effective were these at actually stopping fighters from shooting you guys down?
Well, it was just a matter of luck more than anything else, I think, because everybody was traveling. Your plane was traveling 150, and they were traveling 250 to 3.
Yeah.
And the jet was traveling 500.
Yeah.
And so it was just a matter of luck hitting him. Uh-huh. But you got one plane, German fighter coming in at you above, and you got all these guys, everybody, 36 planes. See, we flew in formations, staggered formation, mm-hmm. so we could have more area, so we wouldn't shoot each other down. And so we flew high, low, and middle, but we were staggered out. Our formation would take up a square mile in the air, a cubic mile. Mm-hmm. And so when he came in, he had all his guns. He had 36, he had 72 top turrets shooting at him. Mm-hmm. He came from the top. He came from the side, he had all waist gunners on one side.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the weak side, but he also had the top turret, the ball turret. Mm-hmm. So he was facing the fighter was facing tremendous odds too.
What about your own escort fighters? How did they come into all this? Where did they?
They patrolled the area, mm-hmm. and wherever we needed them, we'd call them. But they knew where the others were. I mean, we were flying a bomber stream miles and miles long. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody saw him, they'd say, "It's here," or they'd see him here, see him there. Wherever they came, ours would be there. Ours would get there.
Yeah.
And the only thing you worried about if you got shot out of formation or had to drop out of formation, you had to question, do I call for help? Because if I do, the Germans might hear me first.
Over the radio. Mm-hmm. So the Germans are actually listening to your radio.
Oh, they all monitored everything. They knew everything. Yeah. Everybody knew everything.
Yeah.
The pilot especially.
Yeah.
But we didn't know much. We sat back at the back. But no, the information spread quickly. And then our fighters could just come in and fly. We flew wingtip to wingtip almost because we didn't want the enemy fighters to come through. Mm-hmm. If it got into the formation, we were in trouble. Because we were shooting at each other. So General LeMay said, okay, we'll use this box formation and we're going to fly wingtip to wingtip. So we could wave to the guys next door and we could wave to the fighter that came in. Mm-hmm. And it was fun. It was, as long as nothing was happening,
yeah.
Everybody was escorting, having a big time, and thumbing your nose at the guy next door and everything. And you could see him get shot down too. You could see it. It was a different, and to be 19 and do all that, and as I look back on it, of the 30 guys there, 13 of them died and 2 were wounded. And that was about the average for 8th Air Force. You lost a lot of men. They had the heaviest losses of any outfit in the 8th Air Force.